Okay, so I don't think I necessarily need the microphone, so I'm talking for a little bit and I'll probably put it down. But I'm thankful to be here today, and my name is Andy Green. I am a senior at the University of Mount Union. I am majoring in middle child education and a minor in psychology with certification, so grades 4 through 9 in math and science.
My name is Alyssa Carnevale. I'm a double major in public health and Spanish with a minor in sociology.
And then we also have a third group member, but she is on a scholarship for a choir thing, so she could not be here today. But she does have her things in here, so I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself as this little note thing she put on here.
Hello. Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda Panto. I'm a senior communication studies major with a minor in peace building and social justice at the University of Mount Union. I'm a part of our choir on campus as well as the vice president of the Public Relations Student Society of America Mount Union chapter. And I'm joined by my awesome group mates today, Alyssa and Andy, which they will tell you about themselves a little later. And we're here to talk about diversity in schools and what we wish we would have learned when we were in school about diversity. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Dr. Ivory Lyons, who's in the audience today. He is our professor, so thank you so much for coming out and supporting us.
Okay, so as Amanda said, we'll be talking about negotiating diversity, but not so much negotiating, but how to incorporate it in our classrooms, how to incorporate it with our students in our community and our lifestyles today. And so we'll go ahead and start off with.
Okay, so my little blurb is on making schools a safe space for students and promoting diversity and celebrating diversity. So where I got my information was 2 blog posts by a woman named Jennifer Gonzalez. She did a blog post on supporting students of color and making schools a safe place for LGBT students. So I kind of just combined that information, and she had some cool tips and tricks that I thought I would share with you guys today. So her first thing she says is teach your students to love themselves. That sounds pretty dumb, but so she said she gives some tangible tips on how to do this. She says you can do this in both a formal and informal way. First, you could do a simple survey at the beginning of the year. I know my professors give us a note card, and they have us, give a little bit of information about ourselves, some of our hobbies, some contact information. They might ask you, do you learn better through hearing or doing, or are you a more visual learner? So also spending time with your students outside of class can help. In gym class, or maybe once a week, you offer your students to come to your room during lunch and eat lunch with you. Just breaking down that student-teacher barrier. And allowing students to bring pieces of their lives into the classroom. One of the specific things that Ms. Gonzalez said was making a playlist. Have students make a playlist of their favorite songs, and then you put that together and you can play it during work time. And also honoring their language is something that Andy is going to touch on more so later, but this is very important. I remember when I was in elementary school, there was this one girl, and she said, Mrs. Schmiedel, I think that's what our teacher's name was, she said, I ain't got no crayons, or I ain't got no scissors, something along those lines. And she gave her a look, and she yelled at her in front of the whole class, and she embarrassed her. And that's obviously not what we are aiming to do. What you want to do is explain to students that they need to be bilingual and that using academically standard language will open doors in some contexts. This honors where the students come from and acknowledges the value of their home vernacular. So just have an honest conversation with students. Instead of telling students to cut it out, explain to them that sometimes it's appropriate and sometimes it is not. The next thing that Ms. Gonzalez suggests is inviting families and community members to be partners in educating students. You can make an asset map, which is quite literally a list of resources you can take advantage of in the community. Also, use community resources as your curriculum. How can you tie the local resources to what you are teaching in class? 2 great ways to do this is guest speakers and field trips. Today in my substance abuse class, we had a speaker. He was the head of the canine unit, and it was really cool. He actually brought in one of his dogs, And we got to learn more about substance abuse and substance use and the legal side of it today in our class. Also field trips. I know in my environmental science class, we had a large amount of field trips. We went to local nature centers, we went to a wastewater treatment plant. It was definitely the stinkiest field trip I've ever been on. But it was definitely cool getting into the community, and it gives students a sense of pride in their community. Also, keep parents connected via multiple channels, both digital and non-digital channels. Kind of, if you see that something doesn't work, maybe switch it up. You can send flyers home, but you can also send emails. Ask families what works for them. Next. Yeah. Expose students to diverse role models. Invite guest speakers and mentors with diverse backgrounds in the classroom. Maybe bring in a doctor who has a disability or a female firefighter, someone who students can look at and say, oh, that person's like me, and see themselves represented. Also, especially important if you are a language arts teacher, make sure your classroom has a variety of texts that include positive, diverse characters. We Need Diverse Books, or diversebooks.org, is a great resource for this. Also, educate yourself. If you do not know much about a topic, if you don't know much about the LGBT community, or let's say the Black Lives Matter movement, educate yourself. The internet is a great resource. Ask questions. And also check your biases. We all have inherent biases that we might not be aware of, but we need to be aware of those in order to make a safe space for our students. Also, teach inclusively. Teach inclusively. Group neutrality is one simple way to do this. Gonzalez suggests instead of putting kids into groups by boys and girls, use ones and twos, or use birth months, or just kind of get creative instead of putting that divide between boys and girls, just so no one gets uncomfortable, in case that's a topic for some students. Also, evaluate your speech. You never know, you want to find ways to be more inclusive with your speech in your examples that you give in class, and also in your day-to-day speaking. You might suggest that girls like shopping and boys like sports, but you kind of want to stay away from things like that. And also, lastly, educate your colleagues. Suggest professional development to administration and continuing education. As educators, you probably all know of Gleason. They're a great resource to learn more. Also, educate your colleagues. If you hear anyone say something disrespectful or not a little ignorant and not educated, that way you can help make schools a safer space for students. And now I'm going to pass it on to Andy.
So our next slide here is going to be a part of Amanda's presentation, so it's going to go ahead and have a voiceover on it, but this is her topics of conversation, so I'm going to go ahead and let her speak.
A few topics of discussion. Number one, how do we become an ally to people of color, LGBTQ+, and other groups that are going to be in your classrooms? How do we best practice allyship and set an example? And number two, reinventing the bystander role. The anti-bullying initiative is extremely prevalent in schools. I know it was very important when I was in middle school and high school. So really getting students to act and not just sit back and watch. A few topics of discussion. Number one, how do we become an ally? According to the book Well-Being, Positive Peer Relations, and Bullying in School Settings by Philip T. Slee, here's some fast facts you need to know about bullying. It was reported in 2016 that school-based anti-bullying programs effectively reduced bullying on average by 20 to 23%, and that of victimization by 17 to 20%. So when these programs are implemented and executed properly, there is a long-standing effect. And some common or overlapping elements of effective programs that exist included meeting with the parents, firm and just disciplinary measures, and the use of videos in cooperative group work. According to the book Well-Being, Positive Peer Relations, and Bullying in School Settings by Philip T. Slee. There are 3 key roles to the anti-bullying initiative. Number 1, the bully, number 2, the victim, and number 3, the bystander. And although all are important, I really want to focus on how we can get that bystander to transform into an educated ally. I'd like to read a quote from the book, Waking Up White. The author says, "The powerlessness and isolation I felt as a bystander have been replaced by a sense of empowerment that comes with feeling there's a critical role for me in dismantling racism." So there's a critical role for me in getting rid of something that's bad and it's not going to help anyone. So giving that bystander a purpose behind what they're doing. And the goal as an ally would be to interrupt, advocate, and educate without overstepping. There are 3 key roles. So here is the proposition. Do I remain a bystander when I hear a student or even a colleague make a racist joke or an insensitive remark? Or do I become an ally or practice allyship by confronting the bullies that further propel racism in our institutions, so in our classrooms? And here's the catch. Being an ally and not being too quote-unquote white. The ally role is not to take over or dominate. And you'll never be the perfect ally, and you will make mistakes. You may say something that doesn't come out right or may seem insensitive to someone, but you're going to learn from them. So I'd like to read a quote from the author of Waking Up White. She says, "I also have to be careful not to replace the idea that I'm a good person with I'm a good ally, and therefore think I'm not susceptible to screwing up and don't need guidance from people of color and other white allies. I will always have to check my privilege, my perceptions, and my behaviors as I try to work in alliance with people of all colors in the struggle to interrupt, advocate, and educate." So here is the strategies of intervention from that same author is the PEACE model. P standing for preparation and consideration of the nature of the problem at hand. E for education, as well as understanding of the issues by those who are involved. A, action taken and strategies developed to reduce bullying and similar situations. C for coping strategies, which are implemented for staff, students, and parents. And E, evaluation and review of the program in place at the specific school. Strategies of
Okay, so we talked about the bystander, we talked about other ways to help students be safe in our classrooms. But the one thing we need to talk about mostly is the support. So it's easy to come into a classroom and have all these different students in there and not understand what it means for them students to be in that classroom with you as a teacher. When you come into a classroom and you see no one who looks like you, it's important to have someone who stands up for you. All of you know as a teacher, every student just needs one person to believe in them. It takes one teacher, one friend, one somebody to believe in them. And so as a teacher, it's important for us to recognize and not isolate. Obviously, our minority students know that they're minority students. There's no point to continuously point that out to them. So don't isolate them and say oh, we know you're a minority, put you over here. But let's continue to bring them in, recognize their differences, but not isolate them from the classroom. And so it's important that when we don't isolate, that we include them, but give them ways to recognize themselves and give them ways to identify themselves in our classroom. So for instance, on the first day of school, when we go through our checklist and we go through our names on our roster, instead of us reading them out to them, we should allow each student in our classroom to stand up and say their names. That way, if there is any names that have a pronunciation that you may not be able to pronounce, it gives you a way to clarify for that student. Also, it helps other students learn that person's names as well. So if you were to mispronounce a student's name at first, other students hear that mispronunciation and then that's the original one that they have in their head. So it's hard for other students, especially in this age group, to differ from the right pronunciation and the wrong pronunciation. And so I think it's important that we know that our students can identify themselves as minorities and be able to do that. But also when it comes to create support, our role as relationships with mutual respect with our students. Mutual respect is such a big thing in minority communities because being at home is never that. Respect is always earned and not given. And that's how our parents raise us, and that's how everybody probably raises their child. But in the classroom, we seem to forget that, and so we always think that I'm the teacher, I automatically give respect. But in order for a student to respect you and in order for a student to learn from you, they have to be of mutual respect. So you have to respect that student as well. So you can't go into a classroom and say that, oh, I'm a teacher, everything I do, you have to do. So every worksheet you do, every worksheet I give, you have to do this worksheet. It's other ways to approach that. So you say to a student, hey, we're learning this together, I'm teaching you, I already learned it, but I want you to help learn it. So now we're gonna learn it together. We do this worksheet together. Not that you have to do it, because in all honesty, we don't have to do anything but be alive and die. And so it's important that we give our students that mutual respect so that they can learn from each other and learn from themselves and have that perseverance to do their own work in the classroom and not necessarily be guided by you completely all the time. It's also important to take into consideration how our students feel. So many of our students of minority color come into a classroom with fear. When you walk into a classroom and there's no one who looks like you but you, it's obviously going to be some fear there. So a sense to raise my hand and answer a question when a teacher asks, it's not necessarily going to be the first thing I think to come to mind, because I'm already scared that there's stereotypes about me that I'm dumb or I won't be able to answer this question correctly. And if I do answer it incorrectly, when I do raise my hand, it's important that we don't directly shut them down, but criticize and correct and not necessarily say that they're wrong. Like, oh, you are wrong, but let's work through it together and find this mistake. So, for instance, I want to be a math teacher. So in math class, if we're going through an equation on the board and we see students got it wrong, so I say up there like, oh, let's go through it. We go through it step by step how they did it, and then we identify the mistake in their problem. Like, hey, you just made a small mistake. Like, let's go back and fix it. Instead of saying like, no, you're wrong. Does anybody else have the answer? That's ways to shut students down, because if you tell them they're wrong that time and don't give them the chance to correct themselves in the classroom, they're going to shut down because they don't have anybody to go to. They don't have that support in the classroom. So it's important that you be that support for them. It's important that you care about the students. When it comes to minorities and diversity, it's not an easy topic. It's not easy to learn about. It's not easy to teach about. But it is easy to educate yourself. It's easy to want to care. It's easy to care about these students like you care about every other student. You pick this profession for a reason. It's not because you just wanted a paycheck, because we all know that's not it. So you want to care about something. So it's care about the students and let them know you care about them. Don't necessarily, you may care in this room, like they may see this right here, but what do you take from this? What do you go back and put into your classroom? That's what the students are going to see. They don't see this part of what we do behind the scenes. They don't see our professional development. They don't see what we go to try to learn. So it's important that when you do things like this, that you take that back to your classroom and you do implement it so that these students know that you do care. And that's how you build a relationship with them. So their home lives are different. It leads to different values in our classroom. So our values in our classroom may be like, we need to get these good grades, we need to get all A's and B's. But we may have some students who are going through things at home, like raising their brothers or raising their sisters, or they don't have parents. Like, you never know what could be going on at home, so their values may be different. So when they come to class and they're sleeping in class, it may not be because they don't want to, they're bored, they don't want to do their work. They may be tired. So it's different ways to approach stuff like that. Everybody's values are going to be different based on how you're raised. And so it's important that we recognize that in the classroom for each of the students to have a good classroom, learn safe environment. And so earlier she talked about bilingual talking. So basically what we're going to talk about is code switching. So some of our students are actually very, very literate when it comes to code switching, but some of them don't. Some of them don't know how to code switch. Some of them come to the classroom and talk how they talk at home. Some of them come and talk how they talk to their friends. But it's important that we know that those who do code switch, this is what it is. So sometimes they may fail to code switch in a classroom. And according to CodeThought.com, it is the practice of moving back and forth between two languages or between two dialects or registers of the same language at one time. So this definitely occurs more often in speaking than it does in writing. Most students know how to write in a formal manner as long as it's put there for them, if that makes sense. But when it comes to speaking, sometimes stuff just comes out and it doesn't, like someone was to say, like, for the perfect example, nothing, just chilling. But if a teacher actually most likely would say like, oh, I'm not doing anything, or I'm doing nothing. But some students fail to do that code switching, and so then you yell at them and say, hey, that's not how we talk here, that's not how we do this. But you gotta take your time and say, hey, I know you talk like this at home, but let's try this way, let's try something else. Like, let's learn some more vocabulary, let's reach out and do other stuff, besides just shutting them down and just saying that. And often, sometimes our code switching can be seen as behavior problems, because students don't necessarily do that code switching. So when they fail to code switch in a classroom, and they're called acting out, or it's a behavior problem. But in general, it's just how they talk at home and how they talk in their everyday life. So some students will have an education level to code switch and be in a different classroom, so they only know one side of themselves, and that's all they can present to you. And so it's important that you don't shut that down on them, because that's all they know of themselves. So So I think it's important that we take this time and we know that we need to stop. Because every minority student is not going to be the same. They may look the same, they may be from the same family sometimes, but they are not all going to be the same. They all handle things differently, just like every other student in the classroom. So it's important to know that every student is not the same, but we treat them all differently, but not differently in a bad way. So it's like we don't want to be like colorblind, like, hey, I'm gonna treat you all the same, because that's not what we want to do here. We want to make sure that every student has the same feelings and the same education level and the same resources that we can provide to every student instead of just shutting them down. So always ask for help. It's important that we always tell our students this, like, if you don't know something, ask for help. It's the same goes for us. If we don't know a situation or we don't know a topic, ask for help. There's always resources out there that we can use. There's other teachers we can use, other colleagues, other friends. Social media and the internet is such a big thing now. There's different websites that you can go on to that has blogs with different minority students or different minority teachers that can help you and give you ideas and give you ways to work around these situations in your classroom and ways to better yourself to be an educational teacher for all students and not just a certain type of students. And also educate yourself. We have to care. You have to care enough to educate yourself. You have to care enough to want to learn about it, because if you don't, it's not just going to pop out and just magically fall into your brain. That's just not how life works. Diversity is not an easy topic to talk about, and it's definitely something that is happening in our world a lot more now. And it's important that we move along with the current in diversity ways, and that our students all get the same education and be able to have the same experiences and the same opportunities when they leave these buildings. Our goal is to produce future leaders of the world, or future people that go into the world and can be good citizens into the world. May they take big roles or small roles in the world. Everyone has a role, and it's important that us as teachers help those realize those roles in their lives and help them realize that everyone has a purpose here. And now our goal is to teach them and give them different ideas. So when we do teach math and science, not every student is going to love math and science, but not every student is going to love language arts and English, not like all that. But it's our job to introduce them to that, to give them the opportunity to learn those things, to give them the opportunity to find what they love in life and what they want to do after they leave our presence.
To wrap up my presentation today, I do have an audience discussion question. If you would like to share out some of your ideas and thoughts, that's awesome. If not, that is totally fine too. My question is, what might prevent a student from transitioning out of the bystander role to that ally role that we talked about? Would it be peer pressure or judgment? And then what can we do to help students overcome these obstacles? To wrap up my presentation today, I do have an audience.
Okay, so
To wrap up my presentation today, I do have an audience discussion question.
okay.
If you would like to wrap up my presentation today, I do have an audience.
Okay, we're just gonna go to this page. So basically her question was, what do you think that we can do as teachers and educators to get our students out of that bystander role? So often in our classrooms, our students are what drive us and what drive the other students, because at this age level, they influence each other. So at middle school level, they want to know who they are, what they do, who their friend groups are. So our bystander role is an important role at this stage, because if you're a bystander now, it's hard to break that bystander when you continue to grow. And as we know, as the age gets older, the more difficulties we have in our world and in our lives and in our communities. And so a question to you that she said was, what do you think will help our students transition from the bystander role into an ally?
Model it for the classroom from the teacher and encourage the students to do the same.
So that's actually a perfect example, and I have an example from the book we're reading in our class. It's called Waking Up White, as she mentioned before. And there's a little girl named Susie in the classroom, and there's a teacher, and Susie had leukemia. So she had to go through chemotherapy, and she had to lose all of her hair, so Susie was bald. In the classroom, the students were making fun of her, calling her names, and the teacher consistently told them, like, hey, she tried to explain what Susie was going through, but students, they don't really get all that different things. So one day, the teacher came to class with a headscarf on and pulled it off, and she had shaved her head. Now, I'm not saying go shave your head, but she pulled it off, and then after she pulled hers off, the students realized, like, hey, like, this is serious, like, this is something else. And then shortly after that, she noticed that students were also shaving their heads. And so, like she said, it's important to model in your classroom. If you model not being a bystander and you take action, the students will also follow you. Like, that's their age level. They're trying to find someone to lead them somewhere. That's what they want. They want a leader. They want someone to push them in the right direction. They're confused right now. We all are. You have anything else you want to say? All right. Well, thank you for having us today, and I hope you learned something. I hope something good came out of all this for both of us.
Can I ask my students, well, one question that, to audience a little more, that, now they're afraid, because I always
All
ask
right,
questions.
Dr. Lyons, let's hear it.
Well, you know, Alyssa had mentioned that, about being in a different place, and she did go to the masjid, to the mosque. Can you tell them a little bit about what that experience was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had to do a site visit in which we were the minority in a situation. And I've never really been the minority in any situation before, but so I went to a mosque, and it was very interesting. I definitely I didn't know what was going on with a lot of times, but the women there, they separated by men and women. They were very great at explaining things to me, and explaining this is why we cover ourselves this way, because I was a little confused about that, because they had their own ways of being modest and their own ways of dressing, and they were separated from the men, and that was a little bit confusing to me, and they explained it all very well. And it was really interesting to see the ceremony and the service that they did, and I thought it was a good experience overall.
Okay, thanks.
I also went to the museum with the group, but my minority difference was a different view, because I'm always a minority in places, but this was like a different type of minority, because it was more like, so we went there, and I think the biggest thing I learned from that was to ask questions. So I thought that I'm a minority, so it's like, oh, diversity, I'm pretty good at it, but no, like, it's always ways to learn, there's always ways to keep growing. When I went to MC, I was like, when I went to the place, I was like, wow, like, you can always learn something. So we was there, we asked questions like, what does this make you feel like? What do you like about your religion? What do you like about teaching other people about it? Just ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question, because if you're asking it, you don't know. So it can't be dumb if you don't know it. So it's always okay to ask questions. Never feel like any question is a dumb question to ask. Like, you can always ask and get help and get educated for yourself.
Okay, all right, good. I'm good, thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Lyons.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Round of applause. Thank you for them. What's that? We'll start with this. We will start with the staff shout-outs.
Oh, okay, all right, good.